It's coming up to 16 past 8. And Dubbo Regional Council Mayor Matthew Dickerson. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Iain. Great to be hearing you on tour to you, actually.
Oh, look, it's nice to be... It's probably been... I don't think I've done... except for that stint a couple of weeks ago, I think it's been about... nearly 20 years since I used to fill in for Peter Leslie. So it's interesting to be back here filling the roster hole, but that's all it is, I can assure you. Now, you're at the local government conference over in the Hunter Valley, correct?
That's exactly right. This is the annual conference where all the councils, 128 councils across the state, come and gather together and talk about what's important with local government, what we can do, how we can lobby government. We hear from some government ministers, etc. So this is the big conference. LGNSW is the peak body for councils across the state.
Sure, the budget's probably a topic of discussion somewhere along the line, at least even in the side, is that correct?
Not in the side. The main discussion point is really just about budgetary processes, about financial sustainability, how we get more funding out of government, how we can fix the roads, where can we get money from to try and ease the pressure on councils. So not so much the budget in particular, but just funding in general is a huge topic of conversation. It started last night briefly. We had a small event last night, just a welcome function last night, but even just talking to councillors from across the state last night, it was really the number one topic of conversation. Funding, mainly related to roads, but still funding. How do we get more funding?
Well, I think that is a really big question at the moment, because if you look at how much was spent during the COVID lockdowns, how much money was put about the place under various schemes and that sort of thing, surely there has to be a sort of a reining in at some stage. Wouldn't you expect that?
Well, that is part of the problem. We need that bit of reining in, as you say, because there was a huge amount of money spent during COVID. But the last thing we needed was all this intense rain that's just doing so much damage to our roads. So councils across the state are really spending so much money on the roads, but we need to be stopping spending money. We need to reduce our spending, but we can't just stop spending because roads are so vital to, just for example, when people start pulling off their wheat crops, how do they get that to somewhere? How do they get their sheep and cattle to sale yards? How do they move around the food that we need to move? How do we move the goods that we need to move on those roads in the condition they're in? So fixing those roads is important, but there isn't a little bucket of money with all this money ready to be spent on those roads. So that is a major problem. I don't have an easy answer. There's no easy solution there.
Like every time there's a flood event, I guess councils need to apply for things like fixing the roads, that sort of thing, when they have those particular grants and schemes. But it's almost as if a weather event will come, it'll mess up the roads, particularly the dirt roads, but even more so now with the number of potholes in bitumen roads. But either the council can't get a chance to get onto them and start repairing them once they've got the money, or they do actually get started and then another weather event comes and wipes out the good work that's been done.
Yeah, and that can even just be with potholes. And when you see potholes that are patched, when you see potholes start to grow on a road, our staff come along, they fix that, they put some patching in there. But because the ground is so wet, the saturation level of the soil is at such high levels at the moment, there's not really much for that bitumen to stick to. So you'll see a pothole filled and you'll drive past a week later and already that bitumen's starting to come out and that pothole's starting to grow again. So it is a problem trying to get on and fix those roads, fix them while there's so much moisture in the roads or underneath the roads. That's an ongoing problem. But even if we had the money today, getting the materials and the number of people you need to fix those roads, that's an ongoing problem as well. So I sound like I'm a bit pessimistic at the moment. I don't like to be like that. I like to be very positive about things, but it's a pretty tough situation we're in at the moment.
Absolutely. Like councils can't just click their fingers and it happen overnight, because a lot of councils, I believe, use a combination of their own workers and contractors once this work needs to be started. And again, that can't be something that's achieved overnight.
No, and the state government's in a similar situation, and the state government road, so for example, the road between Dubbo and Wellington, it's the Mitchell Highway. Council's not responsible for that. That's a state highway, so the state government is the one in charge of that. They have the maintenance for that. And sometimes they'll contract out to local government. This is across the state. They'll often contract out to local government to do repairs and maintenance in certain areas. So we do have contracts with the state government to do some of those repairs. But meanwhile, your staff are flat out trying to repair your own local roads. They've got to try and keep up to date with those contracts for those state roads. So just having the money is one part of the problem, but then having the staff to do the work. And we estimate before these later series of rain events that our infrastructure backlog on the roads was about $40 million. So if we could say to the state government, what's an amount we need to just get our roads up to a reasonable level, an acceptable level, we would have said $40 million, thanks very much. This is going back a month or two ago. But if we had that $40 million, then we've got to try and find that we can source all the materials, because it's pretty hard to find materials at the moment, and then find the staff to do all that work. So there are these ongoing cascading problems that aren't easy to solve.
Certainly, it is a bit of a catch-22 there. It's very, very hard to navigate through that, especially when the weather keeps recurring like this. They are forecasting, weather conditions with more rain and that towards the end of this week. It's really like you can't get your head above water.
No, that's probably the best expression I can think of, Iain, trying to keep your head above water when someone keeps putting their foot on your head and pushing it underwater again. And we are seeing the predictions in general probably through till December before we get a bit of a break from this weather. And that's got all sorts of implications for us. But also think about those farmers out there. Some farmers are talking about the fact that crops are being destroyed. They're having trouble getting to sheep and cattle. They're getting bogged in certain areas, or they're being put on little islands in terms of the farm because they've got water around them so much. So it is pretty tough for a whole range of people. I had a good chat to a couple of people from Forbes Council last night. Obviously, they're doing it very tough. They're having to evacuate people from homes. At least Dubbo is built in such a way that you don't see a lot of impact on homes. You do see some small impacts on homes, but not en masse. But yeah, listening to some of the staff, the mayor and the staff from Forbes Shire Council last night, pretty big impacts there and pretty emotional. They were pretty emotional talking about the impacts it's having on their community. But we're seeing this across Moree and Lismore and Mudgee. A whole range of different areas are being severely impacted at the moment with this rain.
Certainly are, and of course, from what my observations are, and on the limited information available to me this morning, the water level did not get quite as high in Dubbo last night as expected, although there were evacuation orders again for certain parts and also prepared to evacuate for North Dubbo. And I believe they had set up an evacuation centre for anyone who needed it in the Dubbo PCYC, but I'm not sure. I haven't had any reports of in yet about how utilised that was. But the Emile Sarisia Bridge still remains closed today. It's not expected to be open for traffic because it needs to be cleaned and that sort of thing. And then again, that thing, but particularly Bly Street, getting water over the bitumen and all of that all the time, it must be soaking in there under it. It must be over time. If it keeps happening, it's probably going to need quite a bit of remedial work.
It can do. And if we go back to the 2010 floods, Iain, some of that bitumen along Bly Street, in particular between the soccer ovals as you turned off Macquarie Street down to Bly Street, there were sheets of bitumen that just disappeared. They were washed away completely. And when the floodwaters receded from that 2010 flood, you'd look at that road and you'd think this road was a beautiful bitumen road just before that flood. And now there are meters, there were sections there where there were meters of bitumen that were just simply washed away. And you get an idea of the power of floodwaters. When you think about bitumen, you think that's pretty solid on the ground. It's pretty heavy. That's all done, ready to just withstand all that traffic. But then floodwaters come along and just move that bitumen out of the way completely. Now, we haven't seen that in these latest floods. Hopefully we won't see that in these latest floods, but it gives you an idea of the sort of damage that can be done. But think about those businesses down there on Macquarie Street as well. Some of those have got under or low level storage of their particular goods that they have. They receive a lot of their deliveries into the back entrances there along Macquarie Street, so that restricts what they can receive. You've got the car parks on places like Riverdale there that are impacted. So it does have an impact on trade on those businesses. So it gets pretty tough for some of those businesses along there. Evacuation-wise, we've got the caravan park down along Bly Street there. That obviously had to be evacuated again. Houses at this stage aren't too bad. We're not in too bad a condition. So that evacuation zone was mainly for the caravan park that was needed there. But overall, it starts to become pretty tough mentally on people as well, just putting up with all of this and trying to get through their day. I must admit the agencies, Rural Fire Service, the police, the SES, obviously our staff as well, all work really well together. The staff there of all those, and some of those are volunteers as well as the staff, do a fantastic job. But 2 weeks ago, we got the Sarisia Bridge open quicker than anyone could have expected because those agencies work so well together, and we got that cleaned up, ready for traffic to go on it. And that's, again, what we'll be working towards. Once the waters get down low enough, we can contemplate the idea of opening that bridge up again.
Thank